2728, I would like to suggest that these be sent to study session or something, because they're all requests. You're the one that asked, is that acceptable to you?
I don't know what you mean. I don't know
Well,
what you-
on the agenda is items 24, 25, 26, 27, 28.
Right,
They were all requests from you about a special session on PERS, vision planning, CERT, firefighter training, and video. I don't know that I want to take the time to discuss each one of them individually here, because I think you're looking at a lot of time.
Well, can I make a suggestion on item 28? I think we can get rid of that very quickly and just simply concur with the request and ask the staff to provide us with that information. And that doesn't involve a lot of discussion.
Right, since we're doing it already.
So, are you comfortable with item 28 being disposed of by direction to staff to provide that information?
I just wanted to know what the cost was.
That was the question. Are you
Yeah.
comfortable with staff being asked to provide that information?
That's exactly what I asked for.
Fine, and the procedure is that before we put staff time on it, the board concurs on it. So,
Okay, well, let me just be clear though. I would expect that it should be something that should take no more than about 15 minutes. So I'm not asking for more than 15 minutes worth of work, okay?
For all of them or each one?
Oh, no, I'm just talking about this, what the cost is. I just want a rough estimate of what it costs to take it, that's all.
I think we can.
Yeah, so we'd be prepared to do that. I can put it in my chief's report for next month, if that's fine.
All right.
Okay, good.
But it shouldn't be a staff report.
No, I'll just put the chief's report and then I'll give the breakdown.
And the reason I'm saying that, Peter, is I thought the things we were talking about is when they were gonna consume lots and lots of time. And it was more than, I think what Susan George's recommendation was, if it was gonna take more than an hour of staff time or something like that, then it would be something that we would bring here and get concurrence of all the other board members.
So
I
let
think
me,
we dealt with it, so.
so 28 is taken care of. So on 24, 25, 26, and 27, are you comfortable with deferring those off to either staff or study?
Look, I don't know why this is such a hard concept. I would like to have a discussion with 5 board members about pensions. I just want to talk about it. I'd like to hear other people's ideas. And I can't talk to people because of the Brown Act and so forth. So how can we have a discussion of that without it being a staff report, without it being some action item on the agenda? Can't we just schedule
Okay,
a discussion?
Fine. Do you want separate sessions on 24, 25, 26, and 27?
I consider all of these separate discussions, yes.
So you want 4 study sessions?
Well, you're putting me, I probably want 12.
That's what-
Well, those are the ones that are there, but I think there's a number of different things that we could talk about, but those are 4 that I mentioned at the last meeting.
So,
So my question is are you comfortable with deferring those to a study session? Because to talk about the first one, the first item is PERS, there's a whole bunch of information and stuff about what the actuaries, how they do them. I mean, you're looking at a lot
And
of
then a lot
time.
of us, excuse me, and then a lot of us have, as the president and I, we get on these, monthly conference calls with CalPERS and, listen to their presentations and everything. So, I mean, this is a constant learning experience for all of us, especially the CalPERS concept. And a lot of us, without working with all the board members, we went to these different, like WebR, website training, and to find out a lot about maybe some of these things, Chuck, that you're interested in.
Well, let me be clear, I'm not asking for a staff report. I'm not asking for a training. I'd like to just have a discussion. I'd like to hear your thoughts, I'd like to hear Rex's thoughts. I'd like to just have a discussion of that. I don't know how to effectuate that, so.
Well, I think that you have the right to have that discussion, but to do it in a board meeting, you're looking at an hour or so for each one of these subjects. Plus, there has to be there has to be a little bit of staff time for the discussion, because you're gonna have to get information from them about, if you wanna have a discussion about PERS, what's the actuarial rates and how do they arrive at some of those, to try and help you understand
Well, let me just
Like
say,
what
I
goes
don't,
on.
I don't need those. You might, and you might want them, but that's not something, I would like to have a discussion. I don't know how to say it any more clearly. I'd like to have a discussion where we could actually bring in people from the outside who have some knowledge. We could hear what the options might be in general.
Okay,
I don't care about PERS. I don't want to talk to PERS. I don't have anything, they're immaterial to me. I'd like to talk about what we would like to do about pension planning, how we could unload the risk that the district carries with it. And I'd like to be able to have a forum for that discussion that doesn't violate the Brown Act.
we can do that in the study sessions.
Right, so I agree with Chuck on that. I think it's a fair subject to talk about, considering we're gonna have to deal with, you know, some of the finances as we go through the mediation process and then negotiation, and you know, whatever comes out, we don't know what the outcome is gonna
I
be.
agree with you too. I guess the question that I'm
So-
asking is, how do you want to facilitate this?
All right.
You know,
You're
what is
asking me
your
a
vision
question.
for that, Chuck? Can we just to have a meeting among the five of us with no staff or?
Well, one way to
How
deal with
is-
that would be that we would say, okay, we're gonna have a study session,
Right.
and we would like you to chair it. And then it's your responsibility to organize it.
I'm happy to organize it.
Okay.
So if at the next meeting, we wanted to start at, say, 6 o'clock and have a 1 hour,
No, we'll organize a study session. It's gonna have to be done as a separate, we're gonna have to find a separate time to do it.
couldn't we append it onto this meeting?
Not if you said you wanted to have a long discussion.
I
And if
think-
you bring in
I
outside
think
people
an
and stuff.
hour would be
No, you said 4 hours.
It wasn't an hour, Chuck, but I mean, there's no way we can
Just
discuss.
now? Well, there
No,
was
you
four,
said it in
there's
the
4
meeting.
different topics, maybe that's it or something.
I'm not opposed to it. I think it's a good idea. I'm just wondering, how do I facilitate this? And
Well, I think
Peter
it's
had an
Peter's
idea on how to
Yeah,
facilitate
Okay,
it.
well, that's fine, I was just suggesting it could be the same night as we have a public meeting. That way, if the public wanted to come, they could come to both things.
All right.
I don't know.
Can you and I talk about that, and we will send out an email, let you know
And that's on
what we
item,
come up with?
yeah, and that's on item 24.
Well,
So,
actually, if you look at 24, 25, 26, and 27.
Well, I see those as being, I don't think you can put those
All of
4
those.
things together.
No, not together. I'm looking
And-
at a study session for each one.
Yeah, and I would also suggest that making priority decisions is important, and I don't think that you can't really have a study session, and here I disagree with Director Bernstein, without the staff present, because there's no knowledge base, there's no guidance, et cetera. And I don't think that we can afford to have a study session on vision planning, a study session on CERT, and a study session on firefighter training in this year. Because, you know, that begins to put a big, huge load on people. And we're sitting here now with people on overtime.
Let me respond, first of all, I didn't suggest that staff shouldn't be here, I said I didn't need a staff report, so I want to be clear about that. I think
Okay,
it's-
so if staff were here, then we have to pay them, and
But let me just say, I think these things that we're talking about, if we're gonna be talking about a contract, say, it makes sense to me that we'd want to have a contract with firefighters where we looked at training, for example, and we said, what training will people need 20 years from now? When we hire recruits, what training will they need to have?
see, I think that's the responsibility of the fire chief, not the board.
Those kind of things might be, those are on the operational side of the house, not the policy side.
I don't agree with that. I think that in terms of how we set aside money, what kinds of terms we put in a contract, I think the people we hire today are gonna be creating the district 20 years from now. And we're gonna care about what kind of backgrounds they have.
That's true.
But the fire service will change.
But that doesn't change the fact that that is not within, at least in my opinion, within the responsibility of the board. Now, that's the responsibility that clearly rests with the fire chief and the management team. We have the opportunity when we review budgets to say, is there enough money in here for training, et cetera. But I personally would be very uncomfortable if we tried to set up a training program as a board, because we are not competent to do that.
Well, you're setting up a straw man argument. Nobody's saying, I'm not saying I want to set up a training program. I'd like to hear from the staff, what are we gonna need? Does it, if we're gonna fight fires 4 or 5 stories up, do we need different training? Do we need different equipment? How are we gonna plan for that? Will that equipment that we need fit in the fire stations that we're building today? It seems to me that's what I mean by visioning. It would be nice if we could just have a conversation rather than say, what's happening tomorrow, where we looked a little bit out into the future. And I think that's in part coming from the fire chief, but I think that's the board's responsibility. We have the long-term interest of this district as our responsibility. It's financial and it's also visioning. And where that information comes from, I think it could be any number of places. It could come from Homeland Security, it could come from the chief, it could come from the union, it could come from firefighters. It could come from lots of people. And it most certainly probably won't come from me, Peter. But I think that we ought to at least have a plan as we talk about this. And let me give you an example. I mean, just the most obvious thing to me, if we're going to have, if most of our calls are medical, why shouldn't we have a force that is 100% medically trained? Now, some people might disagree with that, but at least we could have a discussion about it. If we're going to do that, if that's the norm, then we wouldn't pay extra to have medical training because that would be the norm. I'm not talking about anything that would harm current people and current employees. Nobody's going to lose their job or anything like that. I'm just talking about if that's what we want. Similarly, if that's what we want and people don't have it, maybe we got to set up a loan fund or an education fund that pays for that. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, Chuck, that's where we depend on the fire chief to say, well, chief, how many paramedics do we need? And what's your 3 to 5 year projection relative to retirements or disabilities or things? That's when we as a board rely on the chief to say, I need so many slots, so many positions, so many training hours relative to this. So we're depending on him for these operations and his staff for those operational decisions.
But I think, Rob, you're talking tactics, and Chuck is talking more strategy, more visioning. I mean, yes, Harold would be in the best position to understand, you know, what our needs are, or what we have to have or not have. But he wouldn't know what we needed if we didn't say, okay, well, if 70% of our calls are medical, then maybe we should. That's not Harold's decision to make. That
Yeah, it
maybe,
is.
no,
Yeah,
it's
it
not,
is.
because we
That
have
is
to.
definitely an
It's
operational
not.
decision
It's-
on his part as the fire chief.
We have
If
to
he
fund it.
needs,
Well, but it comes to us in
But
a
he
budget
comes to
proposal.
you.
right, exactly.
You know, let me just, for example, one of the things that I pounded on for years was, you know, I think that our response model for medical emergencies is horrible. It's set up this big, huge engine. And I provided alternative examples. However, you know, I also recognize that it's not a decision the board should make that we have motorcycle medics. You know, I provide my input and my advice to the chief, and he discusses it with his colleagues, and they come back and say that that's very interesting, but we don't think that's the way to go. So, end of conversation. Now, every 3 or 4 years, I'll bring it up again. But I reckon it's not my job to, as a director of the fire district, to decide how the district is going to respond to a medical call.
It's his. his
And to
staff.
tie into what you said, those people that are out there that go on the calls, they're looking at it all the time because of the traffic and what's the training, what's the traffic. They look at it all the time to try and come up with new ways. If there was a better way, they're open for it.
See, so Chuck, I think we've acknowledged, for example, that this larger issue of pensions, et cetera, is an issue we're going to talk about collectively. You're going to chair that discussion. As I look at these other things, the future of the CERT program, the training program, the visioning one is, you know, that I'm uncertain about, because if you really want to talk about vision, that truly is a responsibility of the board. I just don't know how we're going to have that conversation. And it's not clear to me that there are any good models for how we sort of sit back and look at the big picture and say, we want to do something very different. I'd be open to some idea of how one might structure a visioning discussion.
So, I mean, if we go back to the 4 items here, Chuck, and I agree with Peter, we have to kind of prioritize. I would take 26 and 27 off the table right now and focus on 24, right, which is the pension issue that you would be kind of chairing and facilitating. And then maybe have a discussion on the vision planning. But I honestly think that the pension issue is gonna be so big, bigger than, and that's actually gonna encompass someone's plan in the vision thing from a financial point of view, which actually is the job of the board. That we maybe just focus on 24 right now and see how that goes, and then maybe look at 25, just seeing after, how 24 goes.
I think that's a great idea. You know, we take 24,
And just
we
start
run with
with
it,
that.
we see how much we can accomplish in that format
Yeah.
on a topic that's relatively broad. And with
And
that
it
experience in
includes
hand,
visioning too,
you know, and then with the experience of
No, no.
pension, and
right.
we then ask ourselves, should we try it again on visioning? And what do we mean by visioning?
Right.
Because I don't want to go say we're going to have a study session on visioning unless we get some idea what we're talking about.
And what I'm saying is the pension issue is gonna entail some visioning. Right, so we're gonna be
Probably
able.
it's not blind, yes.
No, but I mean, I think that we should just take 24 and focus on that right now, which is a
I
huge
agree.
issue. It is a huge issue. And, I mean, it's an issue that we're all interested in, and I agree that we all need to have a discussion about it. It'll take up more time than we think, I think. So if we can
I'm
start there,
happy to
that
make a start. I didn't need to put all of these on here. People just said, Chuck, what do you want to do? I said, well, those are the four.
Well, no.
They got on there.
Fine.
I think we need to make a start,
yeah,
Okay,
so let's
and
start.
we're going to start with 24,
Yeah.
and you're going to chair it.
okay? I would strongly recommend that we do it at 6 o'clock the day we have our next meeting in June.
And how long you want it to go?
Till 7, and then it's over.
I just don't think that's gonna be enough time.
And you're going to bring in outside people, and you're going to do...
Well, when I say outside people, it's not gonna be 30 people, it might be 2, maybe 3, I don't know. You know what? The last 15 minutes, you say, what are the next steps? What do we do?
Your chair,
I just want to have a conversation.
your chair, you got it.
We say, if I knew how it was gonna, if I knew how it was gonna turn out,
Well, but here's what we do
Have to
need
direct
for the
staff.
clerk to do this clearly. So far, Director Bernstein has the agenda item. He wants that to, well, it's kind of been discussed that it's gonna go to the next board meeting in June at 6 PM for an hour.
It's not necessarily the next.
I don't think you should be that specific about it, because we may
Yeah.
very well need a closed session at the next board meeting.
Absolutely.
I would say that you
We're gonna
should,
be
you
somewhat
should.
specific because she's gonna write it down. We have to put it on the calendar.
So-
Well, yeah, but I mean, it
So-
doesn't need to go on, it doesn't need to go on a calendar tonight. I mean, I
Right.
think
Yeah,
it needs,
I
you
agree.
need direction from, I think that
Chuck.
it can be noted that Chuck's desire would be that it goes immediately before a meeting, but I don't think we know what the schedule
We
is
don't know
gonna
what,
be for that.
as
I
it is
agree
the
with that.
June.
As with
meeting.
any meeting, I think he has to sit
Michelle,
down.
what do you need?
Well,
3 votes.
no, I know, but as it is, the June meeting is still, I mean, we haven't totally finalized. when
We
that's
could
gonna
say at a future board meeting and not specify what future board
be.
meeting.
Well, or can we say,
No, I think what we're saying is that we have decided there will be a study session. Director Bernstein will chair it.
right,
And as we always do with setting agendas, the agenda is set in conjunction with the chief and the clerk, and they will decide a mutually agreeable time, and such additional agenda information is necessary.
so in other words, Chuck would be working with Michelle and the chief to deal with.
Yeah, just like Rex does the
with-
regular agenda,
Right,
he'll have the responsibility for doing the agenda for the special meeting,
right.
the study session.
Honestly, Harold, I would not be that specific about it at this point.
So the only clarity I do need.
You
is
say
I
not
know
specific in terms of time?
In terms of
Director
the actual
Bernstein's
date
in
of the
favor, I
vote.
I think
presume.
you just,
Yeah,
Director Carpenter's in favor, Director Crawley's in favor. I haven't heard from Director, I mean, we just need to know, is this the concurrence of the board? 3 is what's gonna carry it, but it sounds like 3 over there agree. I don't know where the other
Yes.
people are.
so.
But- Okay, Rex is yes.
No,
Well, you can't vote for him.
be honest, Ron.
Be honest. I think I've got enough specific knowledge relative to the different pension systems those types of facts. I would like to attend to hear everyone else's point of view.
That's what the meeting's about.
So that brings up the question, if you're going to do this.
That's a
is this
good
gonna be-
observation.
Is this gonna be agendized as a special meeting or as a study session?
Right.
Study session.
I'm not sure what the difference is, but
Yeah.
Study sessions,
Just-
you can't make, there's no decisions that are made.
I don't think any decision should be made.
It's a
Okay.
study session.
We can
is
talk
what
about
it's
what
there.
next
There you
steps
go, that's
might be.
important.
So it's a
Okay.
study
So it's a
session.
study
There we
session.
go. Okay, so we have a study session. I have no problem with the study session.
Well, that's what,
Rex?
I mean, that's what you put on here anyway.
Just real quickly, President Ives, would it be an open session meeting with,
Absolutely.
Yes.
with
Study
notice?
session.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
None of this is gonna be talked about.
Study
It should be
sessions
an
are
open-
generally.
Yeah, there hadn't been a mention of whether it would be
Absolutely.
open or closed.
No, we assume open unless specified.
Copy that, thank you.
That's,
Right.
that's the
So,
law.
study session, all 5 board members agree, time to be determined, 1 hour. Director
No,
Bernstein's
I
gonna
wouldn't even
chair
say
it.
1 hour.
Well, that's
Just
what we
let-
said earlier.
No, let's let them, y'all plan it in terms of, I don't think it's gonna only be 1 hour, Chuck, I'm
Well-
sorry. But if you wanna plan it that way, that's fine.
The chief needs some guidance. Do we wanna put a
Right,
limit
so
on?
trying to get it,
I would put 2 hours.
trying to put a frame around it.
I would put 2 hours.
See, Director Bernstein has offered that he thinks an hour prior to a forthcoming meeting would be adequate. And I think what we've suggested is that as the president does with you with regular meetings, that Director Bernstein meet with you, staff, et cetera, say, okay, when can we do this?
And how much time does it take?
Logistically, how do we make this work?
Michelle? you
Yeah.
go with that?
I'm
And
just,
then, and I would just say,
You still struggling, or?
no, I'm just trying to, by consensus, the board directed staff to schedule a study session to be chaired by Director Bernstein at a future meeting date. Is the
be
best that I can.
TBD.
On,
And if you-
on the PERS,
and
on the PERS
if
pension
you guys
system.
can't agree, then you get the president involved. And you
Right.
still just have 2 board members, and that's perfectly legitimate.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay,
Consent calendar.
Is that, so Director
Yes.
Bernstein, is that okay, I mean, in terms of your intent, or?
Yeah, again, I don't know where it'll go. If after 50 minutes, people say we ought to do this again, then we do it. If we're done, we're done.
so with your permission, can we take off 25, 26, 27, 28?
28
At
or
this
no.
time.
28 we dealt with,
28 we
24 we
dealt
dealt with.
25, 26, and 27, Chuck.
Well, I would say, let me just say, I want to talk only about one of them, and that's the CERT one for a moment. I'm concerned about the direction of the CERT program, and I'd like to consider options for that. And I'll just throw it, I'm not going to be able to issue substantively, but that we have a CERT advisory group. I sat on it for a time. Technically, it's the advisory group to the chief, and in a sense, the chief owns it, and I don't think, we're not there to direct what they do or anything. But I would like us to at least explore some options, where we, again, have a discussion about the leadership of CERT, whether the leadership should be from the top down at the district level, or the leadership is from the citizens getting support from the district. There are many models. There are certain organizations that are nonprofits. There's many that operate like the Red Cross does, which is pretty independent, or like the Boy Scouts do, where there's a staff, but the people that actually run it day in and day out. AYSO is the same thing, the soccer organization. The parents run that, and it's possible that the volunteers could run it. The problem, and I'm not complaining about the problem is some of our best people, whether it's our division chiefs or whatever, just when they're needed for kind of day in and day out guidance, they're sent off to some faraway location. And you got all these volunteers who are ready to go with something, and their leadership kind of evaporates for a month. And I just think we need some more. They're unhappy about that, and I think they're willing to take more responsibility. And we ought to at least look at the possibility. 'Cause I think this idea of a strong volunteer force is really powerful, and we need to nurture it. And I don't know the right answer, but I'd certainly like to, again, I'd like to hear from people that are talking about this. whether it's the chief talking about it, whether it's the people from CERT or some combination. That's really what I'd like to see happen here.
So a second study session?
I disagree. I think that what Director Bernstein's called for is a report from the chief on the CERT program, in which he lays out the way in which it's currently structured, and then we as the board have the opportunity to have a discussion based on the recommendations from the chief as to whether we should consider an alternate structure.
Do we have, I don't even, no one from this board is on that committee. Is there a board liaison?
It should be.
No, I'm not saying there should be, Rex, but what I'm saying is
No.
that,
It's an advisory,
I
it's an advisory
get
committee
that,
to the
I
board.
get that, but
to the
what,
chief.
but what I think Chuck is saying is that we're not even in the loop of what's being discussed, and if there are disgruntled people.
We shouldn't be able to be there.
Okay, then what kind of study session did you have in mind to do? I mean, because that would be bringing us in the loop.
I'd like to, as a board person, it's important to me that we do better than we've done. We're doing well, but we could do better at emergency preparedness. And I'd like to see if perhaps a different way of harnessing CERT energy could make that happen.
Yeah, my recommendation, my recommendation is that you and the chief spend some time talking about that. I've done that, I think other people have done that. If there's gonna be any change in the program, I think it has to come from the management team and the chief saying, hey, we think that there needs to be a different structure. And if you think there needs to be a different structure, I think you should talk to the chief and see whether or not you can be persuasive. Because we can't design, if we design a program here as the board, and then just give it to the chief and the management team and say, do it, and that's not something that they think makes sense and doesn't work well.
What do you want to accomplish with this, Chuck?
I would like to have us have a larger, more effective, more utilized volunteer organization.
I think we all would, but, you know, I know the struggle that we've had jurisdiction by jurisdiction, neighborhood by neighborhood, trying to get this to happen. And I've worked very closely. I was on the Blue Ribbon panel, or the Red Ribbon panel, which set up the Palo Alto program years ago. I know how much time and effort you have to put into it. I know the staffing that they put into it and the dollars that they put into it. And so my advice to you is to spend time with the chief and whoever else he wants to involve in that discussion, discussing alternative ways of approaching it.
Okay, let me just sort of recast this a little bit, because I think at some level, I don't know how fundamental the disagreement is here, but I think the board needs to be more active in terms of long-term strategy that you were suggesting. But what I wonder about is one of the things the board's chartered to do is to give the chief goals. And those goals might be operational, but they might just as well be strategic. It seems to me we have to be informed in some way about what's possible to be able to assign reasonable goals to the chief.
And
And that's why a discussion,
go talk to the chief about CERT. We've all had this conversation, and I know 3 of us have had this conversation with the chief. Rob's had it, Rex has had it, I've had it. We look at our prevention activities, our CERT activity, every time we look at a budget. You know, if you want to propose something different,
all really I want to do, I don't understand, and this is something, we could go to the bar and do this, but I'd like to hear what your idea is, I'd like to just
The
talk
chief-
about it.
The chief had put on kind of a group discussion,
Correct.
what was it, about a year and a half ago?
I think about, yeah. 14
And everyone
months ago.
came in from all the CERT programs, Atherton, we didn't have anyone, I don't think, from East Palo Alto. And everyone wanted to get the program together. And Peter was there, and we got some suggestions from like the FEMA website as to how to establish a cert. So we've had these foundation type meetings, maybe we need another one of those. I mean, but that's something, Chuck, that as Peter is saying, and I agree with Peter, that that's an operational decision that you need to go to the
I don't
chief
think
and
it's
say,
operational, I think it's strategic again.
Okay, well, then it's up to a vote. I mean, my sense is, you need to go to the chief,
Well,
spend time with the
You
chief,
see,
talk to
just,
him about it.
I've talked to the chief, this is not news to you, is it?
No, we
I mean,
discussed
we
it
talked
last
about it,
night.
so it's not like I haven't done it, but it seems to me that the board ought, as we consider what are reasonable goals here, I guess my question
We
is,
do that.
does anybody on the board care about volunteer force?
We all do.
Well, if you do, then wouldn't it be nice maybe if we formulated some goals about what that would look like?
No, because that's not our job.
Peter, let me jump in, because the three of us sit on the E-Prep committee, okay? Rex, Chuck, and myself. Chuck, here's a question, just to everybody. Taking your idea, moving it forward, to a certain degree, it makes sense. Why not start an emergency preparedness committee and then fan out?
Only because it's been dissolved, I mean, we don't have it anymore.
Really?
It isn't really being dissolved, we just put it
We
on
just
hold.
are not, you know,
It hasn't been dissolved, I mean,
we're
officially,
not meeting on a regular basis.
reorganizing or.
it's been reorganized, okay, it's being reorganized, work in progress, whatever that means. It hasn't been dissolved. So why not take this idea, when it gets, as soon as the board or whomever establishes the reorganization of a standing committee or an ad hoc committee, and move it forward from there.
So, based on one of the previous meetings, the whole committee structure's in question at this time, right? Is that correct? Or is that,
That's what Les
that's
You
what?
know, basically, we came to the decision at our previous meeting that we basically had the staff in an overload situation because we had too many committees, too many meetings, and we needed to back off
String.
and focus on the critical issues. And in my opinion, the way that we focus on the critical issues is we look very hard at the budget when it comes to us. We look very hard at what the chief's responsibilities and goals are. And that's where we as a board exercise our influence. And if individuals have a particular issue that we want to advocate, we go to the chief, we advocate with the chief, or we bring the particular issue to the board with a proposal. But I don't think having a study session on CERT or training or visioning is consistent with what we're trying to do. And we're trying to manage this institution in such a way that we provide strategic goals to the chief, and we do that in two ways. We do that in the budgeting process, and we do that in establishing his goals. And if we fail to do that clearly, then we should talk about it. But if you have a particular thing that you think is important, you got to debate that. So when we do the budget, you got to debate that when we do the chief's objectives. We can't be coming along every month and saying, here's a new priority. When we put the chief's objectives together, did you say you wanted a long-range training program?
Yep.
And did it get put on the list of his objectives?
Well, we don't have any objectives at this point, so
Wait a minute.
we have none.
There's some truth in that, because that was where it went to the consultant, Les and Susan. They distilled it into those topics that were discussed at that special meeting.
But you don't perceive that you have a series of board-defined.
I do, because that document lists in there,
Those five
after,
things.
correct, after they distilled in what those are.
Those five
Okay.
objectives.
Yeah.
So those are my mandates
So
right now,
my
the
view,
discussion about
my view of the
prioritization.
board role is to set your goals and to review and approve a budget.
Correct.
You know, this is probably this is probably closed session stuff, but it's not my impression that we voted on 5 goals or any number of goals for the chief. I don't believe that that's the the case.
Can I suggest, we're straying a little bit away from what we're talking about. I would suggest these items, 25, 26, 27, are pretty simple. I mean, I think from my perspective, I think you've shared your thoughts on them. I would suggest you vote as to, at this time, whether the board wants to dedicate time to having a study session on each of these issues. I mean, I'm not sure that you're going to get anywhere. You're going to stray farther and farther afield.
I want to ask a point of clarification about that to Peter, because I perhaps have a misimpression here, but I thought that one of the procedures of this board was that an individual member could put an item on the agenda and have it discussed.
Absolutely, and that's what we're doing. You put 4 items on the agenda, and we're discussing them.
No, everyone's telling me they don't want to discuss them tonight. I mean, but, so let me say, just talk about CERT for a minute. I would like to have a discussion of CERT. How do I go about doing it? I can talk to the
Okay.
chief, and I have.
Okay,
But
you made that proposal, and I make a motion that we not discuss that as a board.
now,
Second.
but
Motion's been seconded.
Now we can have the discussion
Now is,
on
But-
that
but-
motion.
Peter, so now you're saying that a member can only bring up an agenda, or put an item on the agenda if the majority agrees?
No, you've put it on the agenda. The question is whether we now spend more time and effort
staff
on it.
time or
And
follow-up.
you have the privilege, which is unique among all the local agencies, of a single elected member being able to have this discussion. And you have brought it here and said, hey folks, I think we ought to discuss it. There's now a motion on the floor that says, no, we're not going to discuss it as a board.
So, we have another meeting with Les White at some point, right?
Correct, we're re-engaging him, and right now he's supposed to come back and give us a cost in terms of that re-engagement.
So, within those, I don't know what we're gonna be discussing, but I assume you're gonna finish up what we've done before.
That's in the proposal.
Right, and so maybe this issue that Chuck is bringing up regarding CERT can maybe fit into some time slot there.
Well, Jeff, well, we have wait a minute, Bruce. We got a motion on the floor.
I just want to just add something. Chuck, if you can meet with the chief and Chief Navarro,
He has
more than happy, and express what your concerns are with CERT.
Let me say it again, and I'm gonna shut up after this, I promise. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say, and I'm interested in hearing what you have to say, and I'm interested in having you have to say, and I'm interested in you. I wanna hear it and have a discussion. That's what I wanna do. So if I talk to the chief, he's not gonna know what you think, probably. I don't even understand that. I don't understand why it's so hard to have a discussion about a topic. It could be a very short one. Somebody expresses something, 15 minutes later, we're all done, it's over with. But if we're able to put something on the agenda, it seems like we ought to be able to discuss it. But you know what? Let's vote on not discussing it. That's fine. It's sophistry to the extreme here. I don't understand it, Peter, and I'm frustrated with this idea of, oh, we'll put it on the agenda and then we're going to vote to not talk about it. What kind of procedure is that? I mean, if
That's
that's
a much better procedure than not allowing you to put it on the agenda, which is the norm for every other elected body.
Okay.
Now, you may not appreciate the privilege. And frankly, the reason I'm voting against this is because I think this falls within the responsibility of the chief, not the responsibility of the board. And you may very well want to hear what we have to say about it, but what we have to say about it is irrelevant. It's the chief's responsibility.
And Chuck, before, when we had in August 2012, had passed that policies and procedures thing, I think it was somewhat of a bad issue because it kind of gave us the responsibility maybe to divvy into operational type stuff that the chief and his staff should have done. So that's why I agree with Peter insofar as those types of decisions as to CERT for this motion need to go with the chief and staff. And I'm sure that the chief will, whatever suggestions that you have for the program, because you've been working it, he'll work with his staff people and integrate those if he feels that those are good, and then bring it to us and as a final product. If you think that there's staff time involved, that Chuck has hit the different areas, I mean,
What's in the queue for presentations, and Michelle's aware of this, is you have a presentation in June on Alaska, a presentation in July on the mudslide in Washington, and a presentation in August on the CERT exercise, the after-action report, lessons learned, and so forth. That's what's in the queue currently. We did have I thought, a pretty good discussion last night about some of Director Bernstein's concerns. I think some of his concerns are quite legitimate.
do you think some of those will come up in the August presentation?
I think they'll come up before that, because I plan to discuss it with Chief Navarro when I see him again, so.
Motion?
Okay, there's a motion to not act on a request from Director Bernstein to study the future of CERT.
Not the future, sir.
No, not, the
Study
motion
session.
is not to have a study session.
Not to have a session.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain,
Okay. Those opposed? Abstentions? One.
So there was 4 votes, I only saw 3.
Yes.
Do I have a problem? Okay, so before, okay.
It's on Michelle, did you get the votes?
I did.
Thank you.
So what do we,
So now we have to go to 31.
Well, no, 25 and
No.
27 are still
Oh,
open.
I thought
25 and
I thought
27
Chuck
are
took
still
those
open.
off. Or not took
No.
them off.
No,
Okay,
no,
fine,
no,
okay,
no.
got it.
25 and 27 are still on the,
so how about 25?
27.
I'm not gonna have anything more to say about these, you can do what you want. It's just,
Okay. Help me out here, Matt. Where am I?
And I guess you could vote on the request. I don't think you. I
Do
don't
we
know
need to
if-
vote
if-
on the
if-
request?
If Director Bernstein is still making a request to have study sessions on those, you may as well vote to have a study session or not have a study session.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to have a study session on vision planning.
If there's no motion, you can,
There's no second.
you know, you can move to the next.
Okay. 27, to entertain a motion to have a study session on firefighter training, 20-year outlook. Okay. So, that brings us to item 31. A request from Director Solano that the item related to an administrative assistant for the fire chief be discussed by the board.
Okay, we had briefly discussed at our last meeting for me to bring this up, put this on the agenda. The reason why I had asked for the assistance for the chief is because we're in a transitional period with some of his management level positions. And I think the word administrative assistant, maybe, I'm thinking more of an individual that can help him with some of the delegation of some of the tasks until he can fill that deputy chief position and division chief or fire marshal or battalion chief positions. And I think we should, well, first, would you like the assistance of someone like that?
So if you look at the chief's report that I had in there, it actually talks about all the different positions and where they are. It also talks about bringing in some temporary personnel to help us out, because I'm not the only one. HR's looking for some assistance. We're talking about giving training some assistance. We need some assistance over in the shop for doing data entry for the Fleet Max program. So I think in that capacity, we could probably use a temp to help out with some of the administrative work that we're all in need of because everybody's jammed. So I don't want to make it just about me. There's a lot of people that need some additional help. So whether, again, you know, Jenny, I just discussed this yesterday, she needs help getting personnel files, you know, squared away. There's different folks that we can bring in to do some of that work, so.
So I think that's a staff issue and not a board issue, and so I would, if we have to vote on this, I would make a motion to just have the staff have the staff discuss that and not even have this be voted on by the board.
I don't think you need a motion, just,
Okay, well, I mean, it's an
if you
item.
want to, you
You just want to direct the staff to,
Let me ask you, can I ask a question?
sure.
Chief, do you need board approval to bring in temporary assistants?
No.
Okay.
But I do appreciate Director Solano's trying to help.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and I don't want to diminish
I
that.
don't want to take that for granted, so.
And I thank Rob for bringing it up. And if you needed board approval, I would hope that you would ask for it. If you needed temporary hiring authority or a budget,
Budget.
a change to the
Item,
budget
yeah.
because of short-term issues like Director Solano's raised, please let us know.
And we may end up doing some of that. We'll be bringing back to you in June the org chart. I think it's a little early for some of these positions, but part of what we're gonna need, I think, eventually is some additional clerical support for different aspects of the organization that, quite honestly, have probably needed them for quite some time. So, to your point, we will be coming back at some point and looking at that and asking for probably some additional positions. But we're gonna do temporaries first to see, is that good enough?
Okay. All right, that brings us back to the items that were pulled off of the consent calendar. The first one is number 9. Consider and accept the treasurer's report for the month ending March 31st, 2014.
Move accept.
I'll second.
Those in favor?
No discussion.
You raised it.
Discussion.
You've got some
Excuse
issues.
me.
So let me just, I just have 2 quick points on this. One is that I raised some questions and I got answers from our new administrative services manager, so some of my questions were answered. But I have 2 requests. I want to come back to that idea of having some sort of a, if it's just me, that's fine, but some sort of a primer course on reading the financials. It just seems to me even if we don't agree on some things, I think everybody agrees that the financials are a board responsibility. And to not understand fully what the numbers mean and so forth, I think is a problem. So that's just one request. I think there are just some things that we ought to be understanding. Because you read this and I just don't know, is this good news? Is it not good news? So forth. And I can't, I mean, I can read some things, and I'm as trained as anybody on reading financial statements, but I think that it just would help to, in fact, in some ways, I don't think like this treasurer's report should be on the consent calendar, because that's our primary duty. I mean, if nobody has any questions, we vote on it quickly, but it just seems to me that routinely it shouldn't be on the consent calendar. The second thing I was gonna say that would be very helpful, though, is since this goes to both the finance committee and the board, it has 2 dates on it. I can't tell whether anything's been changed between those 2. So I read the first one, and then I end up having to read the second one, and it would just be helpful to me if we had one document with one date, so that if there were changes, I would read the changes, and if there weren't changes, I wouldn't have to read it again. So that's just a request on that.
Anna, did you hear that?
And Director Bernstein, absolutely. I think that is a really good call on your part. So from now on, we are going to go ahead and make changes, red strike, track changes, so that you can see the changes from finance committee to board. Typically, it's not going to be too extravagant. But you'll be able to see the differences.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, Chuck. I mean, I'm looking at agenda item 14, which you also pulled. I mean, and there was a change, because I'd asked for a change to be made. So I don't think that's unfair to ask for that, especially, since a lot of this work happens at the committee level and not everyone on the board gets that benefit to see that.
I would also like to take the opportunity to thank the staff for getting the board packet out earlier and remind us that one of the purposes of that was if you had a question, don't hesitate, touch base with the chief and say, I've got some questions here, and then he can delegate those questions to the appropriate person, and you've got between the time when the package comes out and the board meeting to try to get answers to the questions.
And, for all of you, and I'm pretty sure that, the chief has, your with all of you. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please don't hesitate to ask.
Thanks, Carmen.
Thank you. All right,
Okay,
so
any
then
other questions on 9? Sorry.
there's a motion
Yes, motion made and seconded.
And we
All
were
those-
having a discussion.
On.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, that takes us to item 10. Consider and accept the report.
Motion to approve.
Second?
I have just two comments on this report. One is on page 2 of 3, just under the chart at the top of the page.
Right,
This is for item 10 on a,
I know, hold on, let me get there. Okay, go ahead.
And I'm really just signaling, the information is good, I'm just signaling something to the other board members that says that we're gonna recruit in fiscal year 2014-15 for these 6 engineers and 4 firefighters. That's a lot of people, and I know that with the workers' comp thing, we've got people out right now, and this is an operational decision, I agree it's in the chief's purview, but I'm concerned that we don't have enough healthy, active staff to carry out the mission, so I'm just expressing that concern from the report.
And if I may, the plan is not to recruit for all 10 of those positions in fiscal year 14-15. We have those 10 vacancies, but the plan is to recruit, I believe, just at the firefighter level in 14-15. And that was based on a number of suggestions that were made by interim chief Sporleader and Belleville when they did the recruitment in fiscal year 12-13, is that?
That's
Yeah,
correct.
so they did the recruitment in fiscal year 12-13. The folks started in fiscal year 13-14. So what this does is it keeps us at a healthy staffing level where we're able to meet minimum staffing requirements. We're not overstaffed, and it's actually a little bit more cost effective to allow for overtime versus having fully staffed personnel. But again, I defer to the chief on sort of where we're gonna recruit, and so the direction I've received is that we're gonna hold off this year and then recruit in the following year, so.
So then the staff report's not correct.
I would absolutely support Jenny in that assessment. Not only do we need the staff operationally, but we are able to definitely support that financially as well.
So I apologize because I read the staff report, I guess, a little differently. What I see is the current vacant positions are, and then I see that there's vacant positions under suppression and chief officers. I read the will recruit, I guess I'm not reading that as we mean we're recruiting all of those positions. And I apologize, I
That's the way
didn't
I
actually
Yeah.
review this
It
before
looks
it went
like it,
out,
yeah.
so.
So, I mean,
So
maybe it's more.
I'm reading it a little differently, I apologize, but my understanding is that we're not recruiting for all 10. The engineers will likely be internal
That's
promotions, because that's a internal classification. We don't go outside for that. And then the firefighters would be an external new recruitment.
So we'll actually have 4 firefighters and probably 1 fire marshal.
So the fire
And the
marshal,
deputy is internal, external, we don't know yet.
So
Be both.
so both the deputy chief and fire marshal are being opened up for internal and external applicants.
Internal and external.
That's correct. And then,
The new people will be the 4 firefighters, for sure.
correct, and I again defer to the chief. I was under the impression it was 3, but
And it
It's
may be,
operational.
what we'll do is we'll watch what's going on right now. Here's the variable in this thing, I think Director Bernstein and I discussed this last night. You have 8 people on workers' comp, that's always a moving target, you know, I mean, it can increase, it can decrease. The other thing that we don't know is individuals that will retire, so based upon whatever the numbers will be at the end of the year, then we'll make a decision whether it's gonna be 3 or up to 6 personnel that we'll have to recruit for. But I think his observation regarding right now, where are we with 8 people on workers' comp, that we're stretched a little bit because we're so high. We don't typically run that high with workers' comp. We're usually somewhere around 3 to 4 people, so we're double where we normally are. But the good news is some of those people are coming back pretty quickly, so.
Let me make sure I'm understanding. When it says that there's a vacant position, does that mean that in the budget
It's been
had enough
budgeted.
money for all of those positions?
that's correct.
That's been,
That's
it's
right.
been budgeted essentially.
Right. And so the engineers are a promotion within existing personnel. So they would test individuals within the organization, a firefighter would test that position. If they achieve that, then they get promoted to being the engineer classification.
Let me ask a follow-on question. If you look at page 3, the second paragraph there, I'm going to quarrel a little bit with the wording. It says it's currently projected that wages and overtime expenditures will come in at slightly over the budgeted amount. It's actually 10%. I'm not sure 10% is slight, but I come back here, given, and again, this is an operational decision, but what we're seeing here is, maybe this is because of overtime, it's a suggestion that overtime's running more than we expected,
It is.
and yet we're not hiring people to avoid the overtime, and so I'm just reading between the lines and saying, gosh, it sounds like we're maybe not quite in sync.
Yeah, and there's 2 things that affected overtime this year. So one of them was different programs that we started. So the policy and procedures program, we promoted personnel up. So we have Division Chief, Acting Division Chief Schaefer that's in there currently. What that did was create a vacancy at the battalion level. So we had an acting battalion chief that's a captain move into that spot. That then creates a vacancy at the captain level, so there's an acting captain that fills that spot. All those are going to be either overtime or additional costs. Then you have the personnel from the labor group that we're putting in there in that project as well, that for their days off, we're also paying them overtime. So that's just one project, that's an increase. The other one was, Chief Mara here was moved up into the training division, and that was done again when I came back. And he just recently has moved back out of there after 5 months. So it creates that same opportunity for people to be in different positions, so it's good for career development. But at the same time, both of those, I think, were never thought of when the overtime budget was created back last year. So there's some, it's not necessarily a pure overtime budget that we're seeing these costs incur because we have vacancies or we have workers' comp. It's because different moves were made along the way that's increased the cost of the overtime budget.
I just wanted to make a comment on budgeting. Again, this was something that in my former life, I actually worked in public sector budgeting and so on. One of the things that just, I don't think it's the right way to go about it, I'm just gonna make a statement about me, and that is that I don't like to see vacant positions being the slush fund that's available to fund stuff. In other words, I think we ought to get what we need, we ought to have enough money to do it, we ought to have a reserve if we need more for some emergency. I'm not being critical of that, I'm just saying having, and I assume it's only really 4 positions that are empty plus an increment for these engineers or whatever. But that's obviously, we got a little bit of slush or extra because we haven't hired those things. And even so, we're 10% over our staffing budget. So I think this is something that I'm gonna wanna look at real hard when the budget comes forward. And anyway, I just wanted to make the point.
No, I think it's a fair point.
I don't think so.
Yeah, Anna would know what the actual number is, but, you know, we'll definitely take a look at it. And so she's new, and this was afoot when I came back. I don't think it's a bad thing because we're making some great accomplishments, but, you know, again, it wasn't foreseen when the budget was put out.
There were, just to add to that, when interim chiefs Sport Leader and Belleville were at the helm of the district, a number of promotions took place and changes in staffing took place that hadn't been included in the budget. We promoted 6 captains, we promoted 6 engineers, and we hired 3 firefighters, all really in fiscal year, that impacted fiscal year 13-14. So I think a lot of personnel movement happened that wasn't necessarily projected or foreseen when that budget document was prepared in beginning of February of 2013, given that the chief was still here overseeing that. So maybe provide a little more clarity for why there's a bit of an anomaly in this fiscal year.
Well, maybe the budget wasn't accurate. I mean, I'm not sure what was, I'm not saying the behavior was at fault. Maybe it was the budget wasn't done as well as it should be, but whatever.
And we'll be watching it.
There's a motion, a second on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That gives us number 11. Accept the quarterly report for responses to the SLAC Accelerator.
Did you get your motion in a second?
Carol.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I just had two quick.
Oh, not on this
no.
though.
Oh,
You're right.
All the-
Motion,
on the-
second.
Second,
Okay.
discussion.
Okay, discussion.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I was
Procedurally correct.
This is perhaps a silly question, but I'm trying to understand it, and I gotta read it. There was one, they got the list of calls here. One of them was made by Engine 6, which I assume comes out of Station 6.
Right.
And it gets there before the engine 4.
So if you read the narrative, it says in there that out of the 5 calls that they received for service, 3 they received cancellations en route. So it doesn't, and I talked to John Hitchcock a little bit about this because he's the maker of the report. It doesn't clearly spell out that those were the calls, Engine 6 was canceled. But if you look on the time of how many minutes they spent on the call, out of the 3 calls, there's the other 2, or excuse me, out of the 5 calls, 2 show over 40 minutes of time on task. So the other 3 are the ones that they were canceled. So they never got there.
Okay, it's not bigger. The bigger issue that I wanted to ask about is, I just wanted to ask you about the big picture on this. What does this mean for the SLAC contract? Is it going well? Are they happy? Will it be renewed?
They're very happy. This is the year that we have to go back up. We'll start that negotiation probably in a couple months because we're going to be pretty close to the last 6 months. I mean, we've had it for, it won't be 3 years, but it was a 3-year term. So I've already talked to SLAC about a month ago, and we'll start in a few months in terms of negotiation. The other thing that's afoot is they're also amicable towards us gaining land up there to move the urban search and rescue facility, the warehouse specifically, up to that site. So there's some discussion about how would we do that. Would it be SLAC, DOE landhold, or would it be Stanford landhold? So we're having those discussions as well.
Also, with the false alarms, are they getting better?
They are getting better. In fact, we're below projected number of runs that we were thinking we were going to have up there. And part of that is, to the director's point, they've done a number of things. In fact, one of the things that's not in my report, but you should know about, is we just did EMT training for them. So we just had Paulo Lungy was in there and doing EMT training so that they can be certified, which is a value added for them. It also helps us when we arrive here, they have trained personnel already on site that are rendering aid. So, it's been a very cooperative relationship. They're very happy. They're paying, 1/10 of what they paid before for the service, and it's going well. And the number of alarms are going down only because they're tearing down buildings, they're improving the alarm systems. They go through their security force first to kind of be first on scene, and so it's been a pretty good relationship at this point for both.
Are they going to want a reduction in fees because of the reduction in calls?
I couldn't tell you. But yeah, I can tell you this, that the last time we negotiated this, the number of calls was not what drove the discussion. It was really value added for the service and the things that we were doing for them. So I don't foresee that, but I know that if we're gonna gain property up there, that is on the table in terms of would we reduce the overall contract based upon we'll do this for you. That's something we're gonna have to discuss.
I was gonna ask you that property that I gained, does that help us serve any part of our service area in any significant way?
Well, in terms of the property and moving the warehouse, the urban search and rescue facility, the gain would be that we'd have another site that then would no longer have to generate rent the way that it is currently, or pay rent the way it is currently, which would feasibly give us more grant funds to expend on the program. But having the resources here in the district is a benefit to not only Slack but the residents.
So it wouldn't become a station?
No,
No.
it would be a storage facility, very similar to the one that's out there.
I got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That brings us to number 14. Have you taken care of 14? I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Okay, discussion. Consider and approve a resolution to implement a change to the district fund balance policy and general fund designations.
So this is just an opinion on what I see here, but it feels, I think we're making our life more complicated than it needs to be by having as many funds as we're talking about. I think we really should be focusing on the notion of reserves and not funds. Typically, a fund is where you pay something from, but you can't know everything that's going to happen. So to have a contingency fund, why not just pay it out of the general fund, but you have a reserve for those things, and you have a large enough general fund to cover any number of these things. And I see.
Let me answer that if I can. What I think we have here, and Chief and Anna, please feel free to, is this is the first stage towards redoing our whole budget structure. These were taking the recommendations that Susan made as she left and implementing them, and we see this as an interim step towards a much more rational structure in the future. So we're not saying this is perfect, but these are some changes that Susan felt we could make in the short term that would clarify the situation, get it somewhat better off. But we have no pretense that this is the final way to do it.
And I defer to Anna, because there are changes that are coming, so I mean, it's a fair point.
Peter and Virginia, yeah, thank you. It's Anna. We are making very decided steps towards, clarifying the chart of accounts and the number of funds that we have, because with all due respect, we need to minimize, we need to supply things.
So, yeah, this is actually, Chuck, this goes back to the chart of accounts thing. This is very temporary.
Let me just ask, Anna, while you're there, let me just ask, for example, on the PERS stabilization fund, couldn't we just have a reserve for the amount of our PERS liability? Is there any reason that we need a fund to pay that from?
Well, our PERS liability and the stabilization are two very different things. The liability is that which we have already incurred. We set up this account earlier to say we had so little confidence in PERS' ability to predict the future that we needed to allocate a certain amount of money so that when the inevitable thing happened from PERS, we had funds available to fund it. So the liability is what is known, and this is a contingency based on our assumption that PERS literally doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and Peter is absolutely correct in that assumption.
So let me, will the need for that change when the new law goes into effect next year? Insofar as we're going to have a better indication of what the true value, or at least we're supposed to have a better indication of what the true value of the liability is?
And at that point, we will, as a district, we will reassess what our liability is and move forward from there.
Okay, well, at this point, it isn't a huge deal, but let me then understand, what does it mean when we look at the authorities on the last page of this, page 4? And we have the PERS rate stabilization, and let's just say it retains its balance of roughly $11 million. What does it mean that the decision-making authority rests with the chief for that? What decisions could be made? Is that simply to pay PERS down, or?
So,
Yeah.
so that was the exact question I asked in the meeting, Anna. And it's,
To Virginia's point, it lies with the authority that you delegate to either the chief or myself.
To do what, though?
So anything that would require a movement of a large amount of money, especially with PERS, would definitely need the board's approval.
That's not what it says. It says you don't need the board's approval.
no. So Chuck, in the final budget, stuff that anything that has to deal with the pensions, we get the final say. I asked that specific question because I didn't want the decision-making ability to be with the chief necessarily without having any board.
Oh, we don't want that either.
No, I know, so that was the exact, so, but it wasn't that, I don't have the minutes, but, so Anna, you might wanna give an example as to how that is not the chief's or your role to make the final decision on whatever pension or financial outcome would be for this stabilization, the wage stabilization.
Point taken.
What was that?
I said absolutely point taken.
No, but what Chuck is asking is, can you give us an example of what kind of decision you or Harold would be making for this issue?
So again, anything that is above our signing authority, it will naturally go to the board for approval.
Let me ask in the other way. It's got something about FEMA deployment, and that says the decision-making authority is the board, and that we need a resolution. It seems to me like with this FEMA deployment that happened in just a matter of days, that's just not a practical thing for the board to approve. So I guess I'm missing this. It seems to me that the things the board does do is not given to us, and the things the board shouldn't do is given to us. So I'm just not understanding.
But I think the FEMA deployment issue has to be approved by the budget. Well, I don't know. Is it?
Reimbursement.
Yeah, reimbursement.
Yeah, now it's not, it wouldn't be activation, it would be anything to pay people.
Right, it's
Because
about
that
the
is something
money.
you would have to authorize.
Oh, so it's a reimbursement?
Correct, so if we have civilian
Oh, that's what it
participants,
says. It says deployment.
No,
So.
no, no, but
No,
if
no,
you
no.
look in here and these other,
well, deployment
this,
costs.
the budget, if you look at the other parts of this report, it's pretty clear that it's about the budget and the costs and the reimbursement. Where is that in here? Oh, here, it's on top of, it's on page 3 and 4. The PERS rate stabilization.
And that goes back to, I'm not sure it's always relative these days, but in the past, it would take 9 months for FEMA to actually pay the civilians, many of whom then had no, they were out of pocket. They were in their own businesses and had mortgages due and so forth. So the board established a fund so they could pay those people so they would be made whole until we received funds from.
It's a revolving fund, is basically what we said about that.
So is it the decision of setting up that amount in the fund? Is that what they're referring to?
Well, it would be, so again, beyond, as Anna said, beyond our authority, it's 50,000. These are claims sometimes that go into $300,000, $400,000.
Let me ask just one general question, Anna. I know you need to know some of this stuff to prepare the budget work. Am I correct about that?
Correct.
Is there anything that needs to be done in terms of these authorities and so forth, say tonight, to allow you to proceed with the budget?
Oh, no. They are separate and distinct.
I'd like the opportunity to understand a little bit better that one chart on page 4. I mean, if this is a work in process, I'm okay with that. But I think this chart where we're on page 4, where we're giving so-called decision-making authority, it's just not clear what the decisions are to make.
Well, so let me give you an example. If you look on, I think this may have been the example we discussed. If you look at the PERS rate stabilization, and it goes, it's the second paragraph that talks about the 41%, which is the budgeted rate that this board approved, that we would be looking at. That actually, that 41% decision was not the board's decision. It was actually at the recommendation of the Administrative Services Director at the time. So I think it's those kinds of decisions, and then we have the final say, you know, whether or not that's reasonable or unreasonable, you know, vis-a-vis the budget outlook. Because I think that goes out to 2020, right?
That is, and
2020?
probably that is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's those kinds of decisions that you get to make, but we still have the final approval of the budget, that kind of number vis-a-vis the budget and the projections go, and in this case, going out to that.
It seems to me that Director Bernstein,
That is correct, because when you ultimately approve the budget, you are approving all the assumptions built into
Right.
it.
Right,
Yes.
because that was my exact question, Chuck, in the meeting.
yeah, it seems to me though that Director Bernstein has raised appropriate questions regarding the wording in the table.
Yeah.
And if we don't need to act on this tonight, I would recommend that we table it until such time as that can be clarified. Is that acceptable to you, Anna?
Okay, so,
Well, for the decision-making authority piece, is that what you're talking
Well,
about?
look at the back of the resolution. The second page of the resolution has that same chart
I'm
in
looking at
it.
the chart, right, and the issue is about.
No, but it's in the resolution. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay, I see.
It's actually in the resolution. And I don't think there's sufficient
Well,
clarity.
the chart in the resolution is actually not, is accurate. It is not the chart that is in the report, which is actually the chart that I had requested with those numbers.
Okay.
So I would actually use the chart on page 4 for the chart on the resolution, because that's the one that has that fifth column with the dollar amounts.
yes.
Because that actually, Anna, was not put into the chart in the resolution of the for that fifth column.
I think there's enough confusion about this that I would suggest that we continue it to another meeting.
Well, do you think this is probably more of an appropriate thing to discuss for the June 10th meeting, at the June 10th meeting?
That's about the budget.
Yeah, that's why I'm bringing it up.
Well, we asked the question, Director Bernstein asked, was this a necessary action to take now in terms of preparing the budget? I would consider the answer to be no. It would seem to me that given the confusion about the language in this table, that we
Right.
postpone action on this.
I'll entertain a motion to table it.
I move to table.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Director Bernstein, thank you for raising the issue.
5-0 on the table. Okay,
Sure, okay.
that brings us to 16. Consider a resolution amending contract with Piper Gifford.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion.
I just had one quick question for Anna. I understand from your response that you seem to say that the spread that Piper Jaffray receives is a function of a competitive marketplace, and it's not a negotiated spread, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so as long as it's determined by the competitive marketplace, then it's really, I mean, effectively, it wouldn't matter which organization we used in terms of the cost. One might be more effective than the other, but the cost would be the same regardless of which agency we went with.
Correct.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Okay, any other discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Brings us to number 17. Menlo Park, compliance with the Bay Area Commuter Benefits Program.
That's me. I have your questions, Director Bernstein. Can I go ahead and respond to
Please.
those? As to the pre-tax option, that excludes federal taxes and state taxes. It also, federal and state. It also reduces the payroll taxes that the district pays. The question, Board, was does the pre-tax option exclude federal taxes or just state taxes?
So this is basically a federal law. I mean,
This is
I'm
not.
selfishly asking it because we're gonna have to comply with it as well.
This is not a federal law, actually. This is a pilot program of San Mateo County, but the laws that govern these types of benefit programs fall both within the Internal Revenue Code as well as within sort of these ordinances that have been passed. So, for example, many employers offer a pre-tax payroll deduction for parking cost. That's something that is controlled, the machination which controls the amount that you can do is set by the Internal Revenue Service and the Internal Revenue Code, but it's often administered at the state level. So this is when we have our federal and state governments working in tandem.
So can I ask you, I have a question regarding the fiscal impact. Jenny, regarding this charge, right?
Yes.
How long is this, how long do we have to deal with this? Forever, or?
On which
renewal of
component?
the option?
Pilot program until 2016.
Well, I know, but I mean, pilot program might go beyond 2016.
Correct, so there's a one-time setup of $800, so that's a one-time fiscal impact to the district. Right now, the annual
2
fee
years.
is $200, we have 2 years in the program, and it's a monthly fee of $120. It remains to be seen what the state will do with this program. Again, our region is being utilized as sort of an incubator
Yeah.
for this program, so I unfortunately, I just can't make that prediction. I'll say, from a public policy standpoint, it's probably gonna continue because everybody's desire is to get people off the roads, reduce carbon emissions and all those wonderful
Yeah,
things.
so I'm just
So
thinking
I don't
about-
see it going away.
Right, so I'm just, in the future, we're gonna have to factor this into
Sure,
cost.
to the ADP
Yeah.
administration fees, yes.
Okay, I just wanna put that out there.
Sure.
Because I don't know the time.
Sure. One of the other questions that was posed is there any sort of management responsibilities associated with these pre-tax deductions? To my understanding, Director Bernstein, no. There are not any additional responsibilities. This will operate identical to sort of a flexible spending account, like what we administer for people who put money away pre-tax for medical cost. So this is all,
Don't you use a third-party administrator for that?
no.
You administer it yourself?
The flex spending allowances? No, yeah, we administer it through the district, I believe.
But you have to file an annual report with the federal government.
I believe that the payroll clerk does that, but this is sort of one of those times where payroll is shifting out from under the umbrella of human resources and under the umbrella of administrative services. So I can certainly clarify that with our payroll technician, but this is definitely a little outside of what my day-to-day involves. So I'm happy to get further information.
Well,
for
I'm not
you.
disagreeing with the conclusion, I think
Sure,
it's fine,
sure.
but it just occurred to me that the cost might be a little higher because there's some administrative cost to actually do reporting. It's my last question, it's really the big one for me.
So without getting into too much detail as far as proposals and things like that, because I don't want to cloud a closed session issue with an open session, I don't think so. And the reason that I say that is because if you notice, the whole purpose is to provide an alternative to getting people out of their cars. And a subsidy for living near somewhere doesn't get you out of your car. I'm not sure how that incentivizes getting you out of your car. So how do we achieve, I'm not sure that that achieves the goal that this program is seeking, which is how do we get people out of their cars, onto mass transit, onto bicycles, and onto alternative modes of transportation. Simply living near your employer, in fact, statistically, you're more likely to drive to work than you already use mass transit options the closer you live to your place of employment.
Is that true?
Yes.
Well, let me ask one last question I didn't ask, but the chief, for other reasons, showed me some location data of where people live and so forth in general. Have you done any kind of an estimate of what the utilization of this might be?
We haven't, because this is a brand new program. We're just getting into compliance as it starts in September. We're gonna do an open enrollment for this program in July. So we'll have a better sense then of how many people enroll and how many people take advantage of it. But for example, I can speak to Anna, takes Caltrain into the office, so she would benefit from this program. We have 2 folks who work in fire prevention who also take Caltrain on a regular basis who would benefit. We have a couple of folks who carpool together. So there's definitely people out there that I know are already sort of utilizing mass transit and alternative commuter options, but they're not getting any sort of tax break, if you will, for doing so.
Well, if we could find something that actually worked, and particularly these people that live 100 miles away or something like that, it's actually could save the district a fair amount of money in payroll taxes.
Yeah, so I can speak to, just anecdotally, when I worked for the city of Redwood City, they already had a program in place, and the way that they incentivized employees to utilize alternative transit options was to, if you met having used that alternative system X amount of days in a month, you were eligible to receive a gift card of $25 to Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, or like Starbucks. And so you'd be surprised at how many employees got super excited about that and sort of saw it as a personal challenge on how many days can I take Caltrain, how many days can I bicycle. I think one of the challenges that our district will experience is our work schedule, because we're on a 410 and because we have people who work 48 hours at a time. It may just not be feasible for a lot of folks to utilize this as an option.
Okay, I will entertain a motion for this.
Oh, there's no action required. It's just
Well,
information.
We have to approve it as part of the consent.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'll move.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The consent calendar is approved. That brings us
Thank you for bearing with the
to,
calendar.
no, I think it's actually public comment number 3.
Or 3, yeah.
All right. Oh, yes, what a fascinating crowd. Okay. Want to remind you of the upcoming meeting, June the 10th, the one that was on your schedule that said June the 3rd, got moved to June the 10th. There'll be a special meeting on budget, labor, and the board manual.
Budget, this is all the time?
Budget, labor, and
The board policies.
policy manual.
And then Director, based upon I know Anna can comment to this, sunshine and everything else that we have to do, the board meeting actually needs to be moved to accommodate it. So you have the June 10th, and then you have to have a certain period of time. Anna, can you comment on what the dates are? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Given that there is no finance committee, we will be going for a public hearing on the 10th.
Correct.
And then we will be going for a regular meeting on the 24th.
At the earliest. At
Which
the,
means that we need to cancel the regular meeting of the 17th.
and that would
So
be at
then
the
the question
earliest.
is the
We have a
24th work for
schedule.
everybody?
Yeah.
Director
That's
Solana
a
shaking
good
his head
question,
no.
if you ask me.
I won't be here.
I won't be here either.
25th,
Won't be here either.
26th,
Be here either.
Do I hear 27?
That's a Friday. I would actually, if-
30th?
I think if, I don't know, will you be back on the 30th? I'll be back on the 30th.
Why can't we do the 10th and the 17th?
Because it has to have a certain period of time
I
for,
check for you.
Yes, they had
for it to
we
be
have a
able to
sunset
be
clause.
sunshine.
Before it's finalized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need,
The
We need
30th,
14 days, so.
Virginia, the 30th is all right for me.
Yeah, me too.
Lana, is the 30th work? Does that put you up against the wall or not?
Chuck can't be here.
Anytime after that.
No, we have to do it before the fiscal year ends.
okay, so hold the horses.
You're traveling too, right?
I know. Hold the
You're
horses.
traveling the same time.
We are required to go ahead and adopt a budget by the end of the fiscal year.
Right, which is
That's up to
June 30th.
Yes. However, there is nothing to say that we cannot ratify a budget after the fact.
How far after?
Oh, you can do it in July. The only thing that would prevent ratification is if we didn't have enough money to carry us over to the next fiscal year.
The dry period.
However, we do.
Could we go ahead then and have the meeting on the 17th and then just ratify it kind of remotely or by
No,
calling?
it has 14
What do you mean
days.
by the 17th?
I understand the 14 days, I'm just saying, where we actually go over and have a substantive discussion and then just stop and then ratify it.
I don't think we can do that.
You can't do that. The first meeting was on June 10th. We have to have 14 days after June 10th we have to have the budget out for 14 days.
Right, so the
So there
earliest
will be
time.
no meeting on the 17th?
There will be no
Yeah,
meeting.
there's-
Can we go back to June 3rd and do it?
It's too late for posting, if if we have a public hearing, we need to post 15 days beforehand, and that 15 days would have been Monday, yesterday. So June
I mean,
3rd is
essentially, the earliest date that we can have our budget meeting is June 10th.
What Michelle and I were discussing is that unfortunately, because of newspaper deadlines, we are not able to meet the public notice requirements.
What about the 5th and the 19th?
Well, so what we were anticipating is that we would have a meeting on the 10th,
So there's,
public hearing on the 10th for the budget. And then we would be able to go ahead and have a consent calendar meeting on the 24th to adopt the budget via consent. That way we meet all the requirements.
if it's the
Right, but what Chuck is
24th, I'll
saying.
have to participate by phone.
Right,
Same
so
thing with
that's,
me.
that's 4 of us will be gone.
Yeah, it's not gonna work.
So
So I think you
what
stay
Chuck
with the
is
regular
saying,
meeting on the 17th and push it to
And
July.
I acknowledge that, and so, there is no harm, again, there is no harm in ratifying the budget in July.
July 17th.
but
When you are all here, because, again,
Let
we
us,
have enough money to go ahead and carry us through for a month.
yeah, but what Chuck is saying is why not have the first meeting on June 5th, because the earliest we can have it, is that even too, can we even have it on?
No, she
We
doesn't
can't.
have enough time if you
No,
have.
because it takes 3 days to get in the paper.
and we're not gonna have a meeting on the 3rd.
Correct.
Right, no, we can't.
That's
So if
fine.
we had it on the 5th, it would need to have been, it would need to be published in the newspaper tomorrow,
Which
Hey,
won't,
but-
that
which
won't
won't
work.
happen.
Yeah, it takes 3
Okay.
days to get in the newspaper.
Okay,
It's all about the public noticing.
Right.
Okay.
So are we gonna have the June 10th meeting, or is that gonna be moved to June 17th?
June 10th.
Well,
June
June 10th.
10th, we've got from 2 to
Okay.
8.
Got it. Yep.
I'm sorry, so that's scheduled.
So you have June 10th
Yeah.
for a
From 2
special,
to 8.
and then you have the 17th, we're still having the regular meeting because you have all the other business.
On the 17th.
The regular board meeting. It's the third Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
I thought we were going to cancel that for the
Yeah, for
24th.
the 24th.
Well, but the 24th, no one can do.
No, I know, but then that's why Alan was saying, let's move that meeting out to July.
So you don't have a meeting in,
Yeah, if your regular board meeting on the
We need a
17th,
regular meeting in June.
It was gonna say,
Issues
you gotta have a
come up,
meeting.
you know.
Yeah, that's
so then
fine.
you adopt the budget in July,
correct,
which is okay.
at your
So
regular meeting in
Okay.
July.
have your regular board meeting in June on the 17th. That doesn't have anything to do with what was budgeted or proposed on the 10th. You adopt the budget in July.
Okay,
Correct.
so we'll have a. okay,
So
I
10,
will-
17, 10th, 17th, and July sometime, and July,
Third week,
So let me just,
July
let's
15th.
get a recap. We're canceling the June 3rd Finance Committee meeting.
right?
We're having a special meeting from 2 to 8 regarding budget, labor, and the board policy manual.
Yes,
We're gonna have a regular board meeting on June 17th to discuss other board matters.
yes.
And then in the board meeting in July will be the budget adoption.
And is there a finance committee meeting July 1st or not?
I don't, do we need one? I don't know. Anna, do
Well,
you think we would need one?
No, I don't think so, no.
Going?
So
Okay.
the public hearing,
on the 17th.
public hearing on the budget would be June 17th?
June,
June
July. Oh, no, June 10th, June
June
10th.
10th, June 10th.
We've got a kind of a special closed session, don't we?
Right, but
Well,
this should
we're
be,
gonna
it's
do
pretty
both.
quick, it's just a public hearing.
Because we'll do the budget, the public hearing meeting, and once that's done, we will go to closed session and talk about the other things.
It's pretty, Director, it'll run pretty much like the weed abatement one, with probably as many people.
Okay.
I may be wrong, but that's usually how it goes.
We lost our audience.
Well, yeah, I think Jack had to go home.
I'm telling you.
Move to adjourn?
Does that work for everybody?
But
Yes,
I won't be at the June 17th meeting.
So just to clarify, there will not be a July Finance Committee meeting. That's
Correct.
canceled
Correct.
also. Okay.
Correct. Okay, I move to adjourn.
Second.
those in favor?
Aye.
Is there anybody that's opposed?
Thank you, Ann.
Thanks, Anna.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Anna, for